For example, the famous passage that's often brought up in these discussions, Jeremiah 19:5, when they're burning their children to Molech, and he says, I did not command this, nor did I decree it. It did not even enter my mind.
So, I'll try to be very quick with this. Jeremiah 19:5 is one of the most abused texts from the free will side, and it's so abused that people like Leighton Flowers will only quote from one version of the Bible which uses the word decree. The reason that this is dishonest is because if you look at any other translation, you'll notice that the word decree is translated as spoke. God did not speak it. Do you know why it's translated that way? First and foremost, the word decree in English can mean to speak. It can mean to speak as a given command. The king gave a decree across the land, right? That is not the same context as when Calvinists talk about God decreeing in the sense of determining. So in English, decree can mean to speak, but it can also mean to determine. So it's very dishonest of you to quote one version of a verse where the only version is the ESV, which uses the word decree, and conflate that with the context of Calvinists saying that God determines things. The verse is not saying that God did not determine that these things take place, right? The verse is saying God did not speak it or command it. And you go look at the Hebrew word in the ESV decree, but every other version to speak, it's like 73 times in the Old Testament the word is used, and it always, 100% of the time, means to speak. That's what the word means. It means to speak. So were the translators of the ESV wrong for using the word decree? No, because technically decree can mean to speak. But we need to be honest enough to properly understand the context in which words are being used and not conflate them with other contexts like this overall idea that Calvinists say that God decreed all things. This is one of the reasons I use the word determine instead of decree, so that people can't come along and pull this ridiculous stuff with Jeremiah 19:5. But I want to come back to the idea of, well, God didn't determine. So instead of decree, let's use the word determine. Do you really believe that when God says, I didn't speak it or command it, that means he didn't determine it to come to pass? First of all, that's so clearly what the verse is not teaching. So the verse is not teaching what you're saying it's teaching. But number two, how do you square Jeremiah 19:5 in your interpretation that it means God didn't determine that it come to pass with Hebrews 1:3? So Hebrews 1:3 that God says that God upholds the universe moment by moment by moment. So you have God choosing willingly to exert power in upholding both the people burning their children and the children being burned. God is choosing to exert power so that those terrible things can happen. So how can you sit there and say that God had nothing causal to do with that if Hebrews 1:3 is true? Can you answer that? I can answer that, right? I demand an answer on this. And the reason I'm worked up about this verse is because I hear it all the time, and nobody from my side ever properly addresses what's going on. He's not just creating and letting go of creation. He continues to sustain it. And if these three foundational verses were taken more seriously by people, both non-Calvinists and Calvinists alike, number one, there would be a lot less non-Calvinists, and number two, there would be a lot more Calvinists who were able to properly justify, defend, and attack the other side. Hebrews 1:3, Acts 17, Colossians 1. Commit them to memory, guys, no matter which side of the aisle you're on. And once again, Jeremiah 19:5, God upheld by his power the people burning their children. He upheld by his power the children being burned. The only way those things could have come to pass is if God chose to bring them to pass by his power. How do you square that with Hebrews 1:3?